China's government isn't a big fan of independence movements. News and social media within the People's Republic rarely gives voice to movements calling for autonomy in places like Tibet or Xinjiang. And when they do, they're usually portrayed as violent extremists. But it appears there is one independence movement the Chinese government can get behind. The Global Times, China's government-controlled foreign policy newspaper, has posted footage from a pro-independence march in the Scottish city of Aberdeen on Weibo, the Chinese equivalent of Twitter. So, why the sudden enthusiasm for Scottish nationalism? Kerry Allen, our China social media analyst, explains.
It is unusual. So the Global Times is a big international paper in China, and anytime they post anything, it normally gets a lot of attention. It really follows on from criticisms from UK politicians who they see as interfering in what's been going on in Hong Kong with the protests. So there have been a number of politicians who've been saying there'd be the possibility of looking at citizenship rights for Hong Kong citizens coming to the UK, and basically going back to the whole colonial era of the UK owning Hong Kong as opposed to China owning it. So comments like this have really angered China. And what it's done is it's put this video out to make the point that the UK should be more focused on things at home rather than looking at what it sees as Chinese affairs. So China says that Hong Kong is an area that's Chinese, and it's saying that Scotland wants to be independent from the UK. And it's making the point that there are big protests happening in Scotland as well as Hong Kong protests happening.
And what's the reaction been to this?
There's been a surprising reaction, given that Chinese people have been largely very, very critical of the Hong Kong protests. I mean, they've only seen the idea that these are riots happening, so they're very critical. And what they're seeing at this footage in Scotland is a very peaceful march, people smiling, holding Scottish flags, vox pops of people saying they want Scotland to be independent from the UK. And they're praising it. They're saying they think that Scotland should be independent from the UK. And some are also raising comparisons between the Scottish March, which they see as peaceful, and the Hong Kong protests, which they see as violent.
Because they're not getting the full picture from Chinese state media.
Exactly, yes.
And so this isn't the only way that the Chinese state is trying to harness social media against the Hong Kong protesters, is it?
Not at all, no. There have been big campaigns with its overseas media to further this dialogue that it's been putting out within mainland China to overseas users. So it employs a lot of people to use platforms like Twitter and Facebook, which although they're blocked in mainland China, Chinese people can access with a VPN and create accounts. So they've been spreading these messages that the Hong Kong protests are violent. And Facebook and Twitter have since retaliated and said that they're going to close such accounts because they believe they're misinformation that's been coming directly from the Beijing government.
Kerry Allen.